Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Knights are a staple of fantasy storytelling. They can be brave heroes facing down dragons and rescuing princesses, or they can serve as the right hand to dark forces, terrorizing peasants and challenging kings. Eldraine has knights of all types. And so, in celebration of our return to this enchanting plane, I thought it would be fun to look back at how knights have been represented in Magic the Gathering over the past 30 years. This video is sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, and I invite you to enchant your deck by using my link down below to pre-order Wilds of Eldraine today. Summer of 1993 gave us the alpha release for Magic, and among the trolls and zombies and elves, there were also our very first knights. White Knight and Black Knight had a beautiful symmetry to them. They were both 2/2s for 2 with first strike, and had protection from each other's color, leading to a battlefield standoff, a perfect representation of the balance between good and evil. Over the years, other creature types like cavalry and paladin and horsemen would be folded into the knight category, but these first two mounted champions would establish a precedent that would stand for decades to follow. It did not take long for knights to reach other colors or to reach legendary status, with 3 legendary green and or red knights appearing in the set Legends in 1994. I like how the 6/5 and the 4/7 are both strong enough to tangle with dragons, but are incapable of breaking through each other's armor. For some reason, that's funny to me. I don't know. Anyway, Blue got to dip into knighthood later that same year with Medallion Knights in Fallen Empires. This was another 2/2 with first strike, but it was a touch more expensive than its land-based cousins, mostly because it could gain flying for a turn. But it also suffered from a drawback common among blue creatures at the time, which we called Island Home. This meant it couldn't attack unless your opponent controlled an island, and you had to sacrifice it if you had no islands. And fortunately, that's something we don't really have to worry about anymore, but back in the early 90s, that was a knob they loved twisting to set the power level of a creature. Wild stuff. So we're still early in the game's history, and knights are appearing in all 5 colors, but their rivalry remains most heated across black and white, as seen in 2 cards from Ice Age, Order of the Sacred Torch and Stromgald Cabal. Each of these knights could be tapped, along with a small payment of life, to counter a spell of the offending color, which takes this cross-color pie grudge to a whole new level. Now, up until this point, most knights had first strike, if they had any sort of keyword at all, but that started to change with Mirage in 1996. Flanking gave all of the knights in this set, and there were a lot of them, a shared mechanical identity, and it was a great flavor fit. If you couldn't keep up with the speed and agility of these mounted warriors, you would find yourself at a disadvantage in combat, perhaps even fatally so. Weatherlight gave us Benelish Knight, which was the first you could cast at any time you could cast an instant, or as we would say today, it was the first to have flash. This was another attempt at representing the speed and expert timing of units on horseback, and it's a well Magic would come back to drink from several times over the years. Unfortunately, not all knights arrived in the nick of time to save you. No, sometimes they showed up to spread the glory of Phyrexia, as was the case with Eastern and Western Paladins from Urza's Saga. No longer limited to punishing just white creatures or spells, these agents for darkness added green to their list of sworn enemies, and would eagerly snuff out life across both colors for just a little taste of black mana. Crusading Knight and Marauding Knight from Invasion are another mirrored pair, this time keeping a watchful eye on the size of your opponent's territory and growing bigger in response. Invasion also showed us members of the Coalition coming together to answer the Phyrexian threat. These multicolored knights had protection from their shared enemy color, which helped them feel like their ancestors from Alpha while still fitting into the ongoing story. Skyhunter Cub from Mirrodin is the first knight to mention equipment, and that's because it was a card type that didn't exist before this card was released in 2003. But you can't picture a knight without weapons or armor any more than you can picture one without a mount, so it's only fitting that this creature type would go on to equip many powerful artifacts over the next 2 decades. Tressorhorn Sky Knight from Cold Snap is a great answer to all of those pesky first strikers out there, but his huge casting cost, combined with his relatively low toughness, means that he probably won't rule the skies very long. Planar Chaos gave us all sorts of color-bending reimaginings of classic cards, including Blood Knight, a rage-fueled variation of Alpha's Black Knight. And if you like it when Magic gives familiar things a flavorful twist, you're gonna love Lorwyn, where none of the knights ride horses. Instead, you'll find Kithkin on springjacks, fairies on insects, and goblins atop their own dinner, provided they survive long enough to get a nice fire going. Alara is also big on non-traditional mounts. Lions, lizards, and massive mechanical constructs all get pressed into service here. But the most memorable card from this era is probably Knight of the Reliquary, who's always ready to stand her ground. Stand her ground because she cares about lands, so it's like her ground is her lands and she's standing here. Okay. Knight Exemplar from M11 gives all of your other knights indestructible while upgrading their power and toughness, which made her a helpful ally on our return to Mirrodin, where the Phyrexians were once again on the rise. Heroes came from all corners of the plane, but for once, our usual mirrored pair of black and white Crusaders actually had a bit of disparity between them. We can chalk that one up to the unique properties of glistening oil. The real standout here, though, was probably Pure Steel Paladin, a knight that played well with equipment and could perform pretty explosive combos when paired with the right gear. I'll come right out and say it, Fiendslayer Paladin from M14 has some of my favorite art in all of Magic. The card itself is also really cool, with First Strike, Lifelink, and the ability to shrug off targeted black or red spells, all working together to make this feel like a true force for justice. Unfortunately, knight design somewhat stagnated after this point. We would often still see them with First Strike or Lifelink, but more often they would be used to carry a set's mechanic, like Rally or Support. And that's fine. A few knights in your draft deck should always be a welcome element, either by adding a useful body to the board or by synergizing with the deck's themes. But it's still nice to shake things up and see a knight with a truly unique design once in a while, which was getting harder to do as Magic entered its 25th year. Fortunately, the Vampires of Ixalan rose to the challenge, giving us Famished Paladin with a palpable thirst for blood that unlocked all sorts of delightful infinite combos. There was also Champion of Dusk, a wonderful curve topper that rewarded going all in on vampires, but the Sun Empire answered right back and promised a hefty discount on your giant dinosaurs if you would field a few of their own knights first. From there, we came home to Dominaria, arguably the birthplace of knights in Magic, and this visit did not disappoint. Dauntless Bodyguard was ready to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect your bigger creatures. Grace and Malice gave us yet another symmetrical pair across white and black, and even green got in on the fun with Steel Leaf Champion. M19 brought reinforcements like Gallant Cavalry, who just begs to be blinked for value, and Valiant Knight, who buffs up your team and threatens to make combat an absolute nightmare for your opponent. Core sets continued to turn up the heat, with M20 giving us the Cavalier cycle, one elemental knight for each color, each with abilities that triggered on entering the battlefield and on death, which packed a lot of value into their 5-mana body. This set also gave us Knight of the Ebon Legion, which I consider one of the best one-drop creatures of all time. I'm just as happy to draw it in my opening 7 cards as I am to see it as a top deck to close out a game, and that's a lot to ask from a single black pip. Then we came to Eldraine for the first time and found a land filled with knights, each pledged to a different court and each representing a different virtue. These knights asked us to be found worthy, to uncover great secrets, to press on no matter the cost. They demanded we display courage, commitment, and strength as we battled our foes and tried to bring peace to the realm. They also really didn't want to get turned into elk, but that is a story for another time. From rangers to riders, crusaders to commanders, Eldraine stole the crown from Dominaria and truly became Magic's home for knights, big and small. Now, to be fair, Dominaria United would give the plane a chance to pass the torch, and it did so with another mirrored pair that humbly called back to those icons from Alpha 30 years prior. We've come a long, long way since then, and it's been so fun to watch knights grow with us as players over that time. You can find them in every color, riding every imaginable mount. You can find them fighting for justice or conspiring to spread darkness. You can find legends, walking anthems, and engines that make entire decks possible. You can turn to them in your darkest hour or make your enemies cower at their arrival, always in the nick of time. But where will they go next? And what exciting designs await us within the wilds of Eldraine? Use my link down below to learn more about Magic's most enchanting set and get some ideas for your next nightly brew. Then make sure you'll like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya.